Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning to have a little seminar on protecting your business from cyber crime and fraud. My name is Daniela Hearn. I am the Director of Payments and Corporate Services at Bangor Savings Bank, and we're using a little bit of a different format this morning. We're using a town hall on Teams, so be patient with us and our technology. A few quick housekeeping items. We will be recording this and sending it out to all the attendees later. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A function at the top of the screen. I'll be monitoring that Q&A function, and we'll make sure that your questions get forwarded to John periodically throughout the presentation or certainly at the end of the presentation. So first things first, I'd like to welcome Andy Grover, our Chief Risk Officer, to introduce our presenter today.
Good morning. I'm Andy Grover. I'm the Chief Risk Officer here at Bangor Savings Bank, and I have the pleasure of introducing John Rogers. John Rogers works with Monarch Information Security Consultants, a terrific company jam-packed full of people that I've worked with over the years of just really professional, smart individuals. John, in particular, I've worked with him for a long time. He's got 25 years of experience, but I've probably worked with him for most of those years. He has just been a tremendous assistant to me in multiple parts of my career, not only here at Bangor Savings Bank, but he is dedicated to this. He's done a lot of great work. Virtual CISO, putting together cybersecurity programs, both public and private, a big resource to community banks, healthcare, medical practices, just a wealth of knowledge. He is sought after to do a lot of these presentations. He's a great speaker, very entertaining, and a good friend. So without further ado, I will hand it over to John Rogers.
Eddie, thanks so much. That's really a wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to it today. I appreciate it, though. Thanks so much. And I appreciate the relationship with Bangor, of course, very much. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for tuning in for the power hour of fun that we're going to have. Seriously, though, we're going to talk about some probably alarming things, but hopefully the message that you leave with is that we have the power in our seat to control a lot of the picture we're going to talk about today, even if it feels like sometimes we're along for the ride. We actually do have quite a bit of agency to make our both our personal, our business lives, our communities and families safe by doing very important basic hygiene, we call it in cybersecurity. But before we get to those kind of protective measures, we're going to talk about where we are. So let's talk about that agenda a little bit. We're going to be going through what is risk and what does it mean and why do we care about risk. And at Monarch and other kind of forward-thinking organizations, we like to think about risk rather than security. Even though security is in the name of our company, it's a common term, but it's kind of alarming. And risk is something that all of us face every single day, and we meet it and make decisions about it. And so we don't want to think of risk as a bad thing. We want to think of it as something we want to be safe enough to take the rewarding risk. That's our goal, so that we are feeling protected enough to put our foot forward and do something innovative or do something fun or do something perhaps that's a little bit dangerous in a good way, but something that will return to us. So we're going to look at risk, and we're going to look at the situational outlook and what are the risks we face. What is the internet about? What is it like? What are the specifics of how cyber criminals do their thing? Why are we vulnerable to those things? And how do we protect ourselves? We're going to match up two components of risk: vulnerabilities and threats, and threat actors. Threats and threat actors are interchangeable. Vulnerabilities are things that they exploit to take advantage of us and try to steal money is the number one thing we're probably thinking about, but our identities, to cause disruption in our world. All of those things are on the table. We're going to talk about the tactics and strategies they employ. We're going to specifically zero in on payments fraud, which is a big topic now. It's always kind of been a big topic, but it's more and more important given the next topic, which is artificial intelligence. We're going to just talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and how it is changing the landscape a little bit, and probably more significantly in the near future. And then we're going to focus in on how do we protect ourselves. What are the things that we need to know as people, first of all, and as business owners to make sure we're safe enough to take that rewarding risk. I like to start with principles. And so this is our guiding principle at Monarch. We share a resource, the internet, that is an unregulated space. There are no laws that govern its use. There are laws waiting to be passed, but you can imagine that it's going to be difficult to make those things happen. Our privacy laws change all the time, but right now it is our shared responsibility to protect each other as well as protecting ourselves, because we know for a fact that unprotected IT resources and unaware people will be used to attack others. That's kind of what we know. And so since we know that, we should all get together as a community and do that basic hygiene. Protecting ourselves is protecting others. That is an interesting and an excellent fact that we need to keep in mind. So let's move forward and talk about why we're here today. Risk management. We want to understand, again, how to manage the risks we face in this space: cybersecurity, our use of technology, our use of information, and that goes for people, process, and technology in that order. So if you're thinking that IT systems and antivirus software and firewalls are the end of the conversation, well, they're not. They're not even the beginning of the conversation. People are the beginning and the end. Processes that people follow are the next thing that's important. And then technology that fits the processes and the people is the last part of our conversation, right? So we want to have that in proper order, because what we know is social engineering, which we're going to talk quite a bit today about, is usually the front door to bad things happening. We want to make these practices, these processes, and our people aware, and then make them integral to doing business. Right now, many business people, business owners, employees, staff, think of cybersecurity as a bolt-on burden that they have to shoulder. And we need to convert our thinking into leveraging it into being a strength. Not only a strength that keeps us resilient, consistent operations, but from onboarding people to how we end relationships, cybersecurity has a part that is beneficial to play in addition to being thought of as a burden. And so I like to think of it as the difference between Frankenstein and apple pie, right? Frankenstein, we bolt things on and it's a big ugly mess. Apple pie, it's baked in and it's delicious. So we really want to go with the apple pie metaphor. We want to support our business strategy with our cybersecurity practices. They're not extra. They're absolutely integrated into everyone's work, and they should be thought of as a thing that is part of the job responsibilities, part of the job description. We want to create a culture of risk awareness that makes us more resilient. And that just means when adverse things happen, we bounce back fast. We step over things that would destroy part of our business or disrupt our business. We are savvy. We are savvy in the world in which we live. And to be savvy means to be informed. And so rather than being afraid, we want situational awareness and mindful use. Those are the two concepts we're going to keep pushing today to build those resilient organizations. So what's out there? Let's get into talking about what we're facing, what are the risks, and also the wonders, because let's face it, it's both. It's a double-edged sword. All the technology and information we have available to us has amazing benefits, incredible benefits, unleashing human creativity, but also it is a risk, right? We have risks around every corner. So I'd like to start with this slide because, and it gets updated every year. And if you've joined us in past years, you've seen previous versions of this particular slide, and it's the internet every minute. And what this means simply is, when you look around this wheel, you're seeing services you all use, we all use on the internet, and the vast use that's part of it. So, something like almost 300,000 app downloads from Apple and Android every single minute of every single day. Try to wrap your head around. It's a vast, vast sea of information we're swimming around in. Go around the wheel and take a peek. 2.4 million Google searches every single minute of every day. Almost 20 million text messages every minute. And just do the math of minutes, it is overwhelming amount of data. Now, let's say conservatively, 10, 15% of it is fraud. it's probably quite a bit more, but let's just go with the conservative 10 or 15%. And a lot of it is so well crafted now and so well disguised that we are interacting with it as if it's a legitimate person. We tend to trust. We have a human psychology we share. And that psychology is at work when we use social media and all these platforms. The tendency to trust, the tendency to be helpful, the fear of getting in trouble. Those three components of our psychology are at work whenever we're using these services. So when we're out there, we need to be aware we're connected to 5 billion plus people we've never met. And some of those people want to do us harm. That's a fact, right? So that's what risk awareness is. I have a job to do. I also need to be aware of the risks presented of doing my work. So there's our slide to set the table. In 2023, the cost of reported cybercrime in the US jumped 22%. 22% in 1 year, according to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, which is a very important organization. They're the ones that a bank is going to call if there is a significant loss event related to fraud, to try and get money back, to try and prosecute or find who did it and get our money back from wire fraud, ACH fraud, and all these different things. So the FBI is an important player here, and they publish a report every year. I have a link to it at the bottom of the slide, which will be provided, and it's a good read for everyone on the meeting today. Some of the organizations that are most hit and the types of fraud, you can see investment fraud, extortion, business email compromise, that's BEC. That's a really big problem, as you can see. Look at the number associated with business email compromise. Why is that number so high? Well, it's not hard to understand. Email is a primary channel for fraud, for social engineering, but also people tend to choose weak credentials, weak logon credentials, and also the failure to employ multi-factor authentication in your high-risk activities. High-risk activities, banking, healthcare, shopping, those are high-risk activities for an individual. And so your email account gets compromised and all kinds of things can happen from that one event. The attacker will then learn your patterns of communication, will find out how you communicate with your bank, how you communicate with your doctor, how you communicate, and who you communicate with. And that becomes a ripe channel for social engineering, which means convincing someone else that you have authority or a relationship or create a comfortable rapport with someone who has control of your resources. So you can look at the slide and see the different kinds of fraud events that we're facing, all of us are facing, and how they map out to that 22% rise in the cost of cybercrime in the US in 2023. Let's get into the nitty-gritty a bit about what exactly we're talking about. What makes us vulnerable, and what and who are the threats and threat actors that exploit our vulnerabilities when we don't have control? Control is a word we use in our industry, and banks use control, and you'll hear it talked about with accountants, and it's a control is a protection. It's sort of a synonymous process or protection that keeps us safe, or that makes sure we understand these transactions were authorized, these transactions were not. A control is a way to determine that everything is okay, and also to prevent bad things from happening. So in the vulnerabilities space, weak authentication controls are a primary vulnerability. If you have a password that is constructed of season and year, for example, right now you'd be thinking about summer 2024, and then you'd be able to change that in 90 days to autumn 2024, and then winter 2024. Those are weak credentials, make you vulnerable to an attacker, because those kind of password constructions are very well known to the bad guys. And so they have automated tools that will load the top 100 passwords that humans create and then automatically attempt them in thousands of sites and services across the globe without having to do any work, really. Just hit go, and there you go. And they're going to go try and exploit those weak authentication credentials. Right now, we're hearing about the Ticketmaster breach. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but Ticketmaster was breached, and their use of a platform called Snowflake AI was the doorway into that breach. And the doorway into the breach at Snowflake was for a weak authentication in a test account that was exploited. So it can't stress enough how important it is to care about your password. And we're going to talk about how to do it right. Unpatched or unupdated systems is another vulnerability. Patches come out for a reason. Somebody has discovered a vulnerability in a piece of software, and then the coders at that organization get together and create a patch to fix it. So it's absolutely vital that your computers are patched, your cell phones are running the latest version of the operating system and the security patches that come out for all your devices, cell phones, tablets, your computers. Your phone systems are IP based. So in other words, they're internet based. Patching your firewalls, patching your routers, all of the things that have vulnerabilities because they run software are patched periodically. Microsoft has Patch Tuesday every month. If you're a smaller organization, you can just do a set it and forget it sort of methodology. Larger organizations have to have very complex programs of when they roll out different kinds of patches. But anyway, everyone needs to do that. Zero-day malware is a term reserved for new pieces of malware, in other words, software that hurts us, right? To put it in its most simple terms, that is so new, we don't have a way to recognize it. And that's why the next generation is the term next gen virus protection that's out there is more focused on the behavior of software than the signature of the software. So what does it look like? What is it trying to do? How is it behaving on my network? And this is a great thing to combat that 0 day, because a 0 day means that there's no signature written on that piece of malware that has been sent down to your antivirus software in its update every day. Your antivirus software updates every day or more, could update every hour, with new signatures of new viruses, how to recognize them. That's how your antivirus software works, partly. Now it has this behavior component, and that's awesome. Misconfigured systems, also a big problem. Number one is that top bullet, default user credentials for networking devices for Internet of Things. If you've heard that term before, Internet of Things is like weather stations, baby monitors, smart home technology, where you buy it and install it and then leave the default credentials for the administrative accounts that come with those devices and services. And the thing is that the bad guys know all the default accounts. So it's really critical to change default usernames and passwords when you buy a device and put it on your network. Unhardened operating systems that are just installed and all the things that they're capable of doing are left on. You really should follow a concept called least functionality. And that is to disable and uninstall things you don't use actively, that you don't need, because we think of all those things as an attack surface. So shrinking your attack surface is a great way to protect yourself. And it's a really easy thing to do. There's lots of information on the internet about how to do that for every operating system and device that exists. You should especially look at the Center for Internet Security, CIS, for hardening baselines. They publish them for free for every single kind of operating system out there. Decentralized security systems with end user management. What that means is we've got antivirus software, but any user in our organization can disable it or change it. You want centralized control of your security control. And that includes antivirus software, patching, and things like that. You don't want to rely on end users to keep themselves protected. You want to provide some central protection. And the failure to do that is a vulnerability. Lack of formal policies and processes is another one. Leaving things up to the subjective decision-making of a person sitting at a computer, not a good idea. You want to have good policies that are written in active voice, present tense, so they make sense to people. You don't need all the shalls and musts and all of that. You just need to say, here is what we do in our organization to protect ourselves. You should have an acceptable use agreement that your employees sign so that they attest that they understand. Here's how we use email. Here's how we use the internet. Here's how we use social media. And then it's a consistent practice across your organization that is, again, provides resilience and keeps security not at the top of mind, because we don't want everyone to think, you have to become a security company to be safe. You don't. Security should be applied that's appropriate to your organization and the risks that you face. And other vulnerabilities and the threats. Unauthorized access is one of the threats that we look at. It's an obvious thing to think about. Unauthorized access means somebody who you haven't authorized to use your technology is able to use it. That is the goal of a social engineer or a malware program, is to get access to your machines, your network, your servers, your workstations, and then do what they want next, which is take money, take information and sell it, take identities. So unauthorized access is a big threat. Misuse of access privileges is when you have an authorized user who is misusing their authorization. In other words, taking information, uh, accidentally disclosing it. And so this can be accidental or on purpose misuse. And it would include clicking links in a phishing email, right? That would be a misuse of privilege. It may not be intentional, but it still is a threat that maps out the same way. Unintended exposure of information is exactly what it sounds like. Accidentally emailing the wrong person, putting information on a USB stick and losing it somewhere when it's not encrypted. Those are all ways that we can unintentionally expose. If you allow personal access to personal email websites from your corporate environment, it is very easy to accidentally copy and paste information into the wrong screen, and then all of a sudden you have an unintentional exposure. Disruption of business and IT services, that can happen for many reasons. You may have heard the term denial of service attack, which is when an attacker floods a network with data so that it cannot provide services to legitimate users. That's a fairly common attack. And process failure. So let's say you're updating hardware and software in your business network, but you don't have a good process for making sure that security is top of mind when you're making changes to systems, so you can have a process failure that leaves you vulnerable. These are some of the threats that are out there that we talk about when we're managing risk. Let's talk more about the threat actors. And so this is the image we have of the hacker from our popular conception. Now this image is fed and fostered by media, by movies, by TV. It's this secretive mastermind sitting behind 50 screens with, super fast typing fingers, actively attacking some resource. And it's a real fantasy that is both scary and also not that scary, because this image allows us to think that this person is attacking a target on purpose, when the reality is a little bit different, and it's more like this. Unfortunately, targeting is a rare thing with cyber criminals. Targeting is not the first thing they do. What they do is have a business model. They have a corporate presence where they are. They have cubicles and desks and hundreds of employees working to steal things from you and I. That is the more real conception. It's a little bit more alarming because it makes it more common, which it is. What you're looking at on the screen right now is a call center for a ransomware as a service operation. Ransomware as a service. What is that? Well, you've probably heard of ransomware. It is a type of malware that installs itself on your network and encrypts all your data, and then you get a ransom note. And the ransom note will say a variety of things, but the thrust is this: if you give us this many Bitcoins or this much money, we will give you the keys to decrypt your data and you'll be able to go back to work. Okay, this is a call center for an organization somewhere in the world where we don't have legal jurisdiction. China, North Korea, especially Russia, Romania, right? Where our laws don't go and we have no agreements, and the governments foster these organizations. These are people with jobs, just like you and I. Their job is to create new malware, create new phishing campaigns. They have marketing departments, creative teams, leadership, and their whole job is to support the technology that they create. In this case, they're supporting ransomware software that they rent, and this is, I'm sorry if it's hard to wrap your head around it, but it is for rent, for lease, ransomware as a service. And if you're having a problem with the ransomware working, then you can call the center to get help, just like you'd call Microsoft to get help with your operating system. So this is the reality that we're living in. This is scary, but also gives us comfort. Why? Because these organizations aren't interested in expending a great effort. They are more interested in scanning or sending mass amounts of communications and seeing who left their door open. So if you're risk aware and you're cybersecurity savvy, they're probably going to pass over you. You're going to avoid 99% of the bad things that can happen just by doing the basic things, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Cyber criminals are opportunistic. What does that mean? Well, they look for opportunities. And so I said that image of the hacker gives us some comfort because we think that guy must be targeting something big, right? And then the next slide is the corporate presence of employees working in a cybercrime organization, which is more realistic because it's opportunity they're after mostly. They pick targets after opportunities are realized. What does that mean? Well, if I'm scanning the internet, it's like a car thief walking through a parking garage and looking for open doors. I'm not going to smash a window if someone has left their door open or door unlocked, car unlocked. I'm going for the easy target. I'm going for the vulnerable target. Once I understand that about this particular focus, it can keep me from saying things to myself like, why would anyone attack me? Why would anyone attack us? We're just a small company. I'm just an individual. That is a mythology that needs to be dispelled. We work at it as much as we can because they don't care who's at the end of the vulnerability. If they can compromise a network or compromise a cell phone or compromise a computer, they're going to do it. They're not going to turn around because it's one person or a small company. They're going to put their kit on your network, get themselves comfortable, and then see what they can do from there, which is why I said unprotected IT resources are used to attack others. Well, if you only have 5 computers, they're going to take those computers and try to control them and then use them to attack someone else. So that is kind of their methodology. Their goal is financial gain or to collect information they can sell on the dark web for profit, right? So they're looking for those open doors. They research industries and they do target by industry, absolutely. Now, if they find that they have an open door and a big target, then absolutely their focus is going to shift to doing amazing amounts of reconnaissance research about that organization to understand who are the people in leadership. You may have heard of whale phishing attacks where an email phishing campaign is targeted at leadership because leaders have influence and leaders have authority and people want to follow the things their leaders say. So if I have managed to compromise the email account of a leader, a chief officer in a company or a vice president in a company, and I issue instructions to the people I know that work for that person, I can accomplish terrible things. So yes, absolutely. Once we understand we have a payday coming, then the research and reconnaissance activity is a huge part of a cyber criminal's life, and they're successful. And now bringing it down to the individual level, if you're out on Facebook or out on social media and you've shared everything about your life on your Facebook page, that is a treasure trove for social engineers. If you're interacting with these playful memes that, say like your rock star name is your grandmother's maiden name and the street you grew up on. Those are not accidents. Those are not for fun. That is reconnaissance activity. And that information can be used against you in your community. So there are people out there, their whole job is to gather data so social engineers can use that data to create rapport or compromise where you do banking, where you get your healthcare, where you shop, things like that. Patterns arise very quickly in our behavior. So it's interesting that we are actively sharing all this information that puts us at risk. So I caution you to use social media in a way that keeps you safe while still getting to enjoy the things that you're enjoying about it. Some of the techniques you probably heard and are well versed in phishing, right? Phishing is a very popular attack method. A phishing attack and phishing became so popular because, and it goes back to that slide of the super genius hacker and then the organization, because phishing came to be because it's really hard to crack a firewall. It's extremely difficult. The skill required is high. You have a high bar to entry to crack through a firewall. But it does not take any skill at all to send a million emails out with a poisoned link and get right around that firewall with no effort at all. And then rely on the end user to give you the keys to the kingdom, clicking a link and putting in a username and password in a fraudulent website. That's why phishing is so popular and why we're so susceptible is the thing that I talked about earlier with how our psychology works. It's exciting to get an offer of free Red Sox tickets, right? It can be intimidating to get an email that says your Netflix account's going to be shut off if you don't click this link right now. These are social engineering techniques that prey on our psychology. That's why they're successful. It's hard to resist. So I would say, please resist. Okay. Find a way to resist. What's popular now and what I love is that organizations more and more, even non-regulated organizations, are using software like KnowBe4 or Fished to do phishing practice, phishing testing on their networks to give their users, their employees and staff, an idea of what phishing looks like and how to recognize it and how to then avoid the most common front door of breach events that we see, which is phishing email. We also have website spoofing, which works in tandem with phishing. So if I send in a phishing email and there's a link in there, it might be to a spoofed website that looks like your bank's website or looks like Amazon's website or looks like PayPal, but it's not. And it's a fake website put up to get your credentials. Once you put in your credentials, there's nothing else there. They've got your credentials and they're going to go use them, right? Vendor spoofing is pretending to be a trusted vendor, coming to the door with a hat and business card and saying, oh, I've got to work on this system or that, or I'm here to do some extermination, or I'm here because we have an OSHA mandate to check your outlets in the building. There are a million ways to social engineer using vendors spoofing attacks. ITNS and IS spoofing is pretending to be from an IT department, pretending to be from an information security department, and requesting the user either type something into their browser or type a command into their computer saying that it's for the security of the company. Again, these are all social engineering techniques. Phone spoofing is basically simple, I'm sorry to say, but you can download an app on your smartphone, and using that app, you can pretend to be someone else on the caller ID. It's very easy to use technology, unfortunately. Impersonating in person, malware and ransomware, and then email and business account compromise. These are all related to social engineering. People on people, you could call it a con game, right? Because that's really what it is, except the power that's unleashed by technology is something con men never had before we had the internet. So it's quite dramatic. We also have now talking about specifically in your doing business with Bangor Savings and in banking in general, we have a category of compromises called payments fraud. So let's talk a little bit about these. There's credit card fraud, which we're all very aware of. We heard of the Target breach where there was 127 million or so credit cards stolen. We have wire fraud. We have ACH fraud. We have just basic forgery that still happens. And we have invoice fraud, which is very closely tied to business email compromise because it is a pattern recognition that allows an attacker to understand who's getting paid and when, and then to take advantage of that information to create fraudulent payment, to reroute ACH data where payments are going and things like that. So let's just talk through these real quick. This little bit of wisdom is simple. Remove trust from your vocabulary. People, especially in organizations, want to feel like they're part of a community. They want to feel like they're with people they like and know. Well, that's great. And obviously, that's a wonderful thing. But when we're talking about risk and cybersecurity, we don't like to say we trust or don't trust. We just get rid of the word altogether. And then we just say, we're going to practice these things that keep us safe or make us safer. And it's not about trust, because the mistake people make is that the user account is the person, but they are not the same. The user account is not the person. The user account is what you're trying to secure, and the person can be removed from that account by a bad guy anytime, and then all of a sudden that user is someone you've never met. So removing trust is a really important concept. It doesn't mean we don't trust. It just means we don't use that word to guide us in protecting our businesses and our personal lives. We use another thing called control. Okay, we control as much as we can. So payments fraud, credit card fraud, well, it happens all the time. You know, it's interesting to note that banks are rarely directly compromised. What usually happens in a bank compromise is that a client or customer is compromised, and then that compromise leads to money, right? POS systems in use at mom and pop shops, restaurants, all over the place. They can be compromised because they were unpatched, because they weren't robust security controls in place. Compromised online retails using POS. If we're talking about that Target breach, that breach happened because a heating and air conditioning vendor got compromised. And when they went to work on Target systems, that compromise translated right over to Target systems, and Target had no protection between their heating, or their HVAC systems, refrigeration, and their point of sale system. So they were able to jump right to the POS system and steal all those credit card numbers. So that's how that happened. So credit card fraud is difficult to prevent, but also we've taken measures. So you'll notice you have a chip on your card now, right? And your chip protects you from the kind of fraud that was rampant before we had chip technology. Chip and pin is the best way to go. It really does make it more difficult for the bad guy, and we notice a downtick in credit card fraud because of that. Make sure you're reviewing your statements for your credit cards on a regular basis. Get to know all the transactions that you make. Make sure that you're paying attention when you get those statements, or do a daily check, and even better practice, daily or weekly check of your online banking, just to say, yes, we did these transactions, because the faster you catch fraud, the better off you're going to be, the more likely you're going to be able to get your money back or to be protected. So make sure this responsibility is yours. Know what you've done and make sure you're checking that. Investigate variances. Make sure you're making the calls and figuring it out. Your bank, especially Bangor Savings, these guys are amazing at customer service. They want to help you if something bad has happened. Get on the phone as fast as you can and make sure that you're aware of what you've done and what you haven't done. Wire fraud. Wow, this is a big one because wires are fast and wires are permanent. You only have a little bit of time if there's been a wire fraud to get that money back, and it's unfortunately unlikely, right? So again, we have weak access and authentication controls. Insider threats are also playing a part here, and phishing and business email compromise is a big problem here. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to paint a quick picture. It's a leadership in an organization that does business with a bank, obviously, and does wire payments to their vendors or their partners, and that person's computer gets compromised, and the bad guy sees who they're talking to and has access to all their email and maybe more, maybe even their systems that run their business, and gets to know the cadence of payments and who gets paid, and then issues a wire instruction for that compromised resource, and the wire instruction is carried out by the bank, who thinks they're getting a legitimate wire instruction. All the things have been done according to the program, and so that money is gone, and there you go. The money is gone. Okay, so wire fraud is popular for that reason. Large amounts of money can be transferred very quickly, and once it's done, it's really hard to undo it. What can I do to prevent that? Well, policies and dual control. So make sure you're saying it requires two people to send a wire from my organization. We have an agreement when we make changes with our bank to payment instructions. We have agreements with our institution that say we're going to check and make sure that was an authorized change. We're only going to allow certain people to make changes. You need to know Bangor Savings Bank's internal limits and controls that protect you. If you guys want to, if Danielle or Andy, you have anything to add, please feel free to chime in. But also review your activity. Again, the same as you're looking at your bank statement, look at those wire instructions, look at those wires you've sent, make sure you know everyone. This is something you're going to want to do on a more frequent basis because of the dollars that can be involved.
John, I would
So
just
why-
add to that as well, is that you can download certain activity reports, certainly with our online payment module. I would also say set alerts for certain dollar amounts. If you have
Definitely.
concerns, you can set alerts in the system to notify even a distribution list within your organization that certain activities happen. So I think that might be an underutilized tool. So certainly reach out to us if you have questions about how to use that alerts function as well.
Thanks, Daniel. That's great. That's great stuff. Use the things that are available to you. That's another big thing. Like, there are security protections that are available. I would be using all of them if I was engaged in wiring money or ACH, which most of you are, right? ACH fraud, we're using ACH for direct deposits and all kinds of different kinds of functions, payroll functions. And again, they're vulnerable to the same things, all the things that we've been talking about this morning. And the good news is that the same kind of protections work for this as well. ACH blocking and filtering is something I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. That's available to you from Bangor. Use a designated ACH account. Know your vendors. Know them really well. I have a policy requiring change process with approvals and verifications, set limits, set alerts. That was a great point, Danielle. Alerting is great because you have control over the alerting. Set alerts so that you're aware of when things happen and can quickly respond if something's not right. Again, I can't stress enough how much the response time matters. Being aware as fast as you can, and then getting on the phone with Bangor and making sure you're working with them to resolve an issue. Really key. Paying attention. Again, we go back to situational awareness and mindful use. That's really what we're talking about here. Forgery, signature forgery, check forgery. Secure storage of your checks. Positive Pay is a wonderful service that you can use where you're telling the bank, here are the checks that are coming, and therefore you pre-identified, right? So you're preventing forgery as a preventative measure. I hope you're using Positive Pay. Again, review activity and then review your statements. These are all the ways that you, as a business owner or a business leader or whatever your role, stays in touch with what's happening. And there's a principle I want to relay now, and it's the difference between a project and a task. And the difference between a project and a task is the frequency of performance. So if you're reviewing activity every day, it will take you a minute, right? It will be a task. If you wait a week, if you wait a month, not only have you increased the window of your not knowing something bad happened, but you're also creating a big project for yourself that's going to interrupt the way you're doing business. So I urge you to look more frequently. It will take less time and it will be a much better result. You'll catch things faster when there's compromise or some kind of illicit illegal activity happening. Invoice and vendor fraud, talked a little bit about this. This is a big problem right now, and we see it all the time, folks. And we're involved in incident response way too frequently on payroll that went to the wrong place and invoices that got paid to the wrong bank because the ACH routing information was changed through a social engineering attack or other compromise. This is a big deal. When we get to talking about our protections, I hope that you'll take a breath, because although this is all pretty scary stuff, I want you to know and be very secure in the fact that if you're practicing the right things, you're going to be safe to do business more often than not, and less vulnerable and more resilient. And that's really where we want to put our attention, not on fear, but on our agency to change and our agency to protect ourselves. And especially working with the professionals at Bangor Savings who are interested, believe me, they want security to be the foundation of your relationship. Okay. So you have to participate to make that true. Let's talk just a bit about artificial intelligence. I have a lot of strong opinions about it that I'm not going to share today. But what I am going to do is say that social engineering is on steroids with artificial intelligence. So we have these things called LLMs, large learning models, and they have enhanced the bad guy's ability to create more convincing impersonations, better grammar. Okay, that's one of the big ones, because the way you used to be able to spot a lot of phishing emails is because it just didn't sound quite right, or the spelling would be wrong or something like that. Well, AI is helping the bad guys get better with their grammar. Isn't that sweet? And so it's a more realistic misrepresentation of gender, background, language, and status, all these things, use of social media. I mean, if we're talking about the damage that bots are doing in every aspect of our culture, we'd have a whole week-long seminar talking about that. But right now, what we're talking about is this. AI is making it easier to be a bad guy. You need less skill and you need less reach, because AI has both of those ready to go for you. And as you think about this, a large learning model is a massive amount of data that AI uses. And I'm not going to get into the technology of it, but let's just say that systems in an AI large learning model are pitted against each other to constantly refine how they can fool each other and detect being fooled. That's why we now have deep fake video and deep fake images, because systems were pitted against each other to create fake things and to detect fake things. And it's iterative, it goes back and forth until they have something that they can't detect is fake. That's what deep fake is. That's why it works on us. We're seeing it everywhere. If you're out on social media right now, we have digital influencers that are not humans. They are, by every measure, look human. They say things, and it's hard to detect that they're not real. So social engineering is really a big thing. Malware and code generation, again, enhanced with artificial intelligence, because the AI can write the bad code very fast and respond very quickly when it's detected, to rewrite certain things to fool our antivirus systems or just to fool our antivirus systems by quickly changing little markers in a piece of malware that get through our protective systems. So really important that you're using a good quality antivirus system. And incidentally, Microsoft's suite of antivirus and anti-malware products are very good, but you can also go the next level and get more control and better protection. All these things that you're seeing are just enhanced with artificial intelligence. And a vulnerability to exploitation timeline has shrunk. And when I talked about patching earlier, when a patch comes out, it's because there's been a vulnerability detected. Well, there might not be an exploit yet written for that vulnerability. What that means is, okay, a bad guy has discovered, or someone has discovered, there's a vulnerability in a piece of software, but they haven't yet found out how to exploit that vulnerability. What AI is doing is shortening the timeline from the vulnerability to the creation of an exploit. So we want to make sure we are patching our systems as fast as we can, guys, as fast as we can, get those patches deployed, tighten up the timelines, find a way to do it. It's really important that that happens. And then disinformation is obviously rampant. I talked about deepfakes, so I'm not going to get into this very deeply, but suffice to say, we are swimming in it right now. It is all over the place. And just be more skeptical is my advice. Be more skeptical in what you're reading, especially if it easily agrees what you want to believe, right? Just be more skeptical. Let's get into talking about protections for the last minutes that we have together. So through Bangor Savings Bank, you have some tools that you should be using. We've talked about ACH blocking and filtering. It's optional fraud protection. You can take advantage of it. You can block ACHs at the account level. You can use a filter to whitelist the companies you pay, right? So a whitelist is a wonderful thing because it says, these are the only people we do business with. Anyone else, say no, kind of a thing. Control your ACH transactions. Positive pay we talked about with checks is a way to inform the bank before these are the checks we're writing and this is what to look out for. And we have a different contact information. Danielle, you wanted to share.
Yes, I'll send it out at the close when I send out the recording and your presentation. I'll send up the best contact information. Shelley is certainly available, but we'll give you a group of folks that you'll be able to reach out to if you have additional questions. And I would just say, in addition to these two things, just a general review of your administrative functions through Treasury Online, sometimes just a conversation about how you're using the service and talking through with one of our officers can help provide some good ideas for you to better protect yourself as well.
That's great. Thanks, Danielle. Let's get into more general things now. Maintain your risk awareness. Remember that you're not having a personal experience on your personal computer. It's easy to get into what's called a risk homeostasis, where you are used to a certain level of risk, and then when nothing bad happens, you get comfortable and let down your guard. What I would say is kind of remind yourself, find a way to remind yourself. I recommend reading KrebsOnSecurity.com, which is a layman he's a journalist who writes about security. It's an enjoyable thing to read, even though he talks about scary things, he writes about them well. It's a good way to keep security on your mind, but not obtrusively so. You don't want to become obsessed with it. You want to just use it to your benefit. So you're not having a personal experience. Understand the risk associated with what you're doing in your business life and develop mindful use habits. Pay attention to the clicks. Pay attention to the URLs. Don't just mindfully proceed to your goal. Make sure you're paying attention to each step on the way to the goal, each step on the way to buying something, each step on the way to doing banking, each step on the way to dealing with your healthcare providers, all the things that you're doing in your organization. Mindful use is a really important thing because you can avoid a lot of danger by being aware of where you are. Require good password hygiene. If you're still using an 8-10 character password, you're not protected. You're not safe. That is not a safe number of characters. A password can basically be thought of as math. And it's when someone attacks your password, it's a math on math attack. The longer the password, the longer it would take to crack. You want to go at least 12 characters. I'm more comfortable if you choose 14. You don't have to make a crazy complex password. You can use a longer password that's made of a phrase that you can remember, which makes it easier to manage. So use strong passwords. Consider using a password manager like Dashlane or KeePass, because they will create strong passwords for you that you don't even have to know and automatically log you into the sites that you use where there's sensitive information being exchanged, and make it manageable to have hundreds of passwords, which a lot of us have. Tens and even hundreds of passwords that we have to manage. You don't want to reuse passwords because the bad guys have automated tools to test. Once they compromise one place, they can test 1,000 others with those same credentials with the click of a button. So you want to make sure you're using unique passwords at each place you exchange sensitive information. And practice good password hygiene. This is a chart that will hopefully bring it home for you how fast it is to compromise an 8-character password with all the complexity. 5 minutes. Folks, 5 minutes. Why is that true? Because the math of an 8-character password against a tool that works at 1 to 3 million tries per second. That's a hard thing to absorb. 1 to 3 million tries per second. Your 8-character password has 5 minutes shelf life. Once you get up into 12 characters, look where we are. Even if you don't use complexity with 12 characters, if you're just using letters, upper and lower case, that's a 6-year time to crack. So that is the case for strong passwords. Can't make it any clearer than that. So require that good stuff. Don't use season year and things like that. Use a formula, use a phrase, change the phrase. Here's a couple of examples of, this is a 4 unrelated words password. At least they're words you can remember. Don't share your password with others, right? Change compromised passwords. Those seem obvious, right? I put these 2 links in here because they're great things to subscribe to. The FTC, especially if you have aging parents and kids, the FTC publishes all the newest fraud things, how bad guys are using email and things like that. It's a really good thing to subscribe to their feed. Err on the side of caution and report suspicious activity. Develop a resilient business. And how do you do that? You're going to get these slides, so I'm not going to read the slides, but you want to create policies that tell people what's acceptable and guide your business to consistent behavior. That's really what you want. You want people come and go from companies for all kinds of reasons. You want the what we call institutional knowledge to be consistent, so people come into it, and when they leave, the new people can come into it too. And it's a consistent application of policy. You want to configure your computers according to guidelines that secure them. Microsoft has those. And like I said, the Center for Internet Security is a really great resource. Conduct training like this annually inside your organizations. Ask your IT provider the right questions. Again, I'm not going to read these, but they're all there for you. You'll have these slides available. Ask these questions. They're really important questions to ask. How the staff works with your data, because a lot of you are using managed service providers or IT providers. You don't have internal IT departments where all these things are a matter of the internal business. You have to ask these questions of your providers. And then your third-party vendors, you want to do some due diligence on the people you do business with that are critical to your operation, that have a connection to your network, or that manage your data in some way. And in this world, that's most of you on the call today, are trusting vendors out there. Know what they do in their security programs on their side. Really important. To recap here, know that you're not having a personal experience out there. Feel comfortable, feel safe, feel like you have agency, because you do. You can protect yourself. Working with Bangor Savings, you can give a high degree of confidence that you're going to be heard, and they're going to work with you to help you in this matter. And if you have a problem, especially, reach out as fast as you can to the folks at Bangor Savings so they can help you get to the root of the issue. Understand the common strategy and tactics employed by cyber criminals. Know the internet, know the basics. Protect yourself out there. Use antivirus software, strong passwords, things like that are just basic security hygiene. Protect you more than most things will. Know what your IT provider is doing for security, and know more about your vendors. And with that, we're at the end of our chat. Are there any questions that we can answer for anybody before we go today?
Thanks, John. There's no questions in the Q&A. It was so very thorough, and I think people are probably digesting the volume of information.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
You shared with us today, but everyone will get a copy of the presentation, a copy of the recording, and contact information for John and for us here at the bank if you have follow-up questions. John, thank you so much. We all know
Thanks,
that
everybody.
it's the speed, right? The speed with which things are happening now. So really prompt reconciliation, doing all those things that you have said to help protect ourselves are really important. And thank you, Andy, for kicking us off today. And thank you all for joining us. Oh, one question, looks like someone had a question about whether or not the bank still uses trustee or rapport. I don't know, Andy, do you want to take that answer for us real quick?
We don't require it anymore. That is a self kind of service product that you have to download and use. We had some difficulty in kind of enforcing that. It is a good product to use if you would like to, but we're not requiring it anymore.
Good question.
Okay, well, with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll give you all the contact information for any follow-up questions after the recording is sent out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.